What I call the Bitcoin singularity is when we all enter Bitcoin consciousness. And the Bitcoin consciousness is when my Satoshis and your Satoshis can be exchanged between us telepathically. And then all of your Satoshis become my Satoshis, and all of my Satoshis become your Satoshis. And we are in one being of the hive mind. And I can send you Satoshis telepathically. And I can just look at you and just send you 1,000,000 Satoshis. And you can be like, thank you. You can send me 800,000 back. Thank you. And that constant murmuration, like starlings in the sky, flying through the digital space of Bitcoin and perfect money, is when we enter the kingdom of Bitcoin and we become one with Satoshi and we see the face of Satoshi.
For over 3 consecutive weeks in June 2025, Bitcoin has held strong above the $115,000 mark, signaling a shift away from short-term speculation toward more strategic, long-term accumulation. This price stability comes amid growing global attention, driven by the launch of new spot Bitcoin ETFs, including one backed by a major social media company, and the U.S. government's move to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve. Together, these developments reflect a rising tide of institutional adoption and regulatory endorsement, solidifying Bitcoin's position as a core asset in both financial and political systems. In a recent interview with Bitcoin magazine, Max Keiser explored his vision of a Bitcoin singularity, a future where the boundary between people and value disappears. He describes a state of Bitcoin consciousness, where exchanging Satoshis becomes as natural as human interaction itself. Keiser likens this seamless flow of value to the synchronized movements of starlings in flight, symbolizing a digitally unified world where trust and connection are redefined through Bitcoin. As Bitcoin continues to show resilience and deepen its role in the global economy, conversations are evolving beyond just price action and technology. Keiser's perspective challenges us to see Bitcoin not just as an asset, but as a force capable of transforming how we interact, build trust, and perceive value in a decentralized digital age.
Yeah, good question. So it's really a two-prong attack, which is, of course, you promote Bitcoin, but you also have to keep out the shitcoins, which is a very important part of building a Bitcoin culture and a Bitcoin country. To that end, in El Salvador, after we got there, we created the Bitcoin office, which is reports directly to the president. We also created a law which states that only Bitcoin is money, everything else is essentially an unregistered security. So all the shitcoiners would have to go through the registration process, and that keeps most of them out because they don't want to spend even any time whatsoever. They just want to start scamming people right away. So they have to go through a bureaucracy. They'd rather just move on to some other city somewhere else. So that's part of it. Then education is key. So we have education programs starting in the 7 and 8-year-olds in El Salvador are learning about money. What is money? And then Bitcoin. So all that can be wrapped up, shrink wrapped, and bring it over to Panama, and then they adopt it to the local scene, and we have the revolutions spreading to the region.
Many would say that the bottom up or top down approach, maybe there's some people that say it's not as effective. What would you have to say to that?
Well, there's definitely the best scenario is a bottoms-up, top-down approach happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
And the bottoms-up approach is without doubt essential, and without question, Bitcoin has always been a bottoms-up peasant revolution, really.
This is how you buy and sell crypto the easy way, using eToro, one of the world's leading trading platforms. If you're new to crypto, eToro makes it super simple. Let me show you how I bought Solana in just a few taps. First, head to the search bar and type in Solana. Tap on it, then hit trade. I'm going to invest $10, that's the minimum. Now just hit buy and done. I now own Solana. Selling is just as easy. Go to portfolio, tap your Solana asset, then click close and confirm your sale. Super simple. That's how quick and beginner-friendly eToro is. But here's why I use eToro. Earn up to 4.3% interest on non-invested funds, 0% commission on stocks, and you can set up an account in just minutes if you want to start your crypto journey. Use my link in the description to sign up to eToro today and start trading.
So what I like to think of it as, and it was front-running institutions, and you can only do that if you're starting at the bottom and working your way up. But to have also, in addition to that, a top-down approach, also helps. And so that was the challenge moving there, was can you create a government partnership to create a Bitcoin country? And so that's been what we've been doing. The experience has been good, and we feel like we can now showcase that and go to a country like Panama and have that kind of top and bottom approach. So I think they complement each other, but if you only had to pick one or the other, you would go with a bottoms up approach, because that's essentially what Bitcoin is all about from its inception. Really, it was a movement from the very beginning, like, working out on a sovereign level. And, game theory, we saw it in the very beginning as it worked its way through the developer community in Bitcoin and in the early adopters, and then in the early movers and shakers, the early investors. And when it hits a certain level or strata in the stack of the economy and in society, it'll trigger game theory. It'll trigger more people to want to mimic what's going on because they see something that they want to be involved with. And with Bitcoin, ultimately the beauty of it is the beautifully incentivized structure of the components of the stack of technology, which includes a social stack, a social component. And so when it gets to the nation state level, the game theory once again kicks in. So Panama looks at El Salvador and they see a country that's gone from the most dangerous country in the world to the safest country in the region, that Bitcoin is a big part of what's happening in El Salvador. And so word of mouth, right? We heard about the mayor of Panama City was a big fan of President Bukele, and he was starting to embrace Bitcoin. We hear that through diplomatic channels, to be quite honest. So we offered to visit, and then once we stick our nose under the tent, all hell breaks loose, right? Because we're like, we're very good at orange pilling people. So politicians have the need, for example, jobs. That's one of the things they need to do, jobs and security. Those are two things they need, education. So when you pitch it on a government level, you try to tick those boxes, because that they, at a minimum, have to look at that themselves. After almost 15 years of orange pilling people, different types of groups and things, you just have to kind of know your audience. All right, you're asking two different questions, right? And you're saying, what's the risk in these corporate treasury plays, that MicroStrategy or strategy pioneered? Like, where is that going? And then you're talking about gold confiscation? Okay, that's like a separate question. So the first question is that what Saylor identified after he identified the melting ice cube, which was his basic thesis for Bitcoin going back to 2020. He could have bought it back his own stock, or he could have bought gold with all his cash, but he started buying Bitcoin because it was an inflation hedge and it was compounding at a rate that was greater than inflation. And he knew that holding cash was a losing strategy, and just buying back your own stock, I think that he figured there had to be something better than that. Because up until Michael Saylor, pretty much the only thing these companies did to boost their earnings was buying back their own stock. He introduced something new. This was really a remarkable achievement and milestone in corporate finance. Then the next thing he figured out or implemented was that, look, I've got the ability to sell at the market ATM common stock with very little regulatory hurdles to jump, and immediately buy Bitcoin with that. And my shareholders, they're not going to complain about dilution, because ultimately I'm buying Bitcoin, so it's accretion. So dilution equals accretion is something that, again, Saylor kind of, I would say, he maybe didn't invent that idea, but he brought it to a state of something of approaching perfection on the corporate finance side. So now, after tirelessly pitching this idea to companies around the world, you now have the surge of companies doing the Saylor play. So where is that going to go? Well, it works for as long as these companies are accessing cheap money. That means they're taking on debt. They're putting debt on the balance sheet. and they're loading up with Bitcoin. But then you have to say, is this yet another credit cycle? Is it like another dot-com crash in the making? Is it another shitcoin crash? Is it another bond crash like 1993, the stock market crash of 1987, long-term capital management crash, I think that was 95. And I would say, yeah, it's going to be, they're building up a huge amount of unsustainable debt that's going to blow up at some point. I don't see it happening soon, but I believe it will lead to the next cycle's top in Bitcoin will be corporate treasury overindulgence.
El Salvador is doubling down on its Bitcoin first vision with bold moves and an unambiguous message. Bitcoin is in, everything else is out. The country's latest strategy is a two-pronged approach. First, it continues to promote Bitcoin not just as legal tender, but as the only digital asset that truly matters. Second, it has drawn a firm regulatory line by officially classifying all other cryptocurrencies as unregistered securities. This classification, supported by new legislation, cements Bitcoin as the sole state-recognized digital legal tender. At the core of this initiative is a dedicated Bitcoin office that reports directly to the president, an unprecedented signal of high-level commitment. But El Salvador's efforts go beyond government infrastructure. The country is also sowing the seeds of long-term adoption by introducing financial education programs focused on Bitcoin and sound money principles to children as young as 7. This grassroots education, paired with top-down enforcement, creates a powerful model for sustainable integration. El Salvador's approach is already drawing attention from neighboring countries. If nations like Panama choose to follow suit, it could spark a regional domino effect. From a game theory perspective, El Salvador's aggressive stance may pressure other governments to adapt or risk being left behind. This isn't just a shift in policy, it could be a foundational blueprint for the next major Bitcoin bull run. Let's watch more clips from Max Keiser's interview.
What I call the Bitcoin singularity is when we all enter Bitcoin consciousness. And the Bitcoin consciousness is when my Satoshis and your Satoshis can be exchanged between us telepathically. And then all of your Satoshis become my Satoshis, and all of my Satoshis become your Satoshis. And we are in one being of the hive mind. And I can send you Satoshis telepathically. And I can just look at you and just send you 1,000,000 Satoshis. And you can be like, thank you. You can send me 800,000 back. Thank you. And that constant murmuration, like starlings in the sky, flying through the digital space of Bitcoin and perfect money, is when we enter the kingdom of Bitcoin and we become one with Satoshi and we see the face of Satoshi. And then we dissolve as ego-driven monkeys taking acid, and we become pure spirit. Speaking at the halving party in El Salvador, and a 9-year-old kid came up to me on stage and with a similar question, like, I'm 9 years old, am I too late for Bitcoin? And I said, after thinking about it for a moment, actually, I'm too early. What I mean by that is, in 20 years' time, when he's 29, he'll be living in a Bitcoin world. And everything that comes with living in a Bitcoin world, I'll be gone.
What would you say is like the biggest obstacle or challenge in that Bitcoin faces in the path to becoming a global reserve currency?
Fear.
Fear?
Fear of everything that we've been talking about. Fear of love. And everything can be divided between fear and love. Those are the two paths, only two paths available to anybody at any moment. Bitcoin is a path to love. Fiat money is a path to fear. Everyone who's against Bitcoin is fearful, full of fear that something will be taken away from them, that they'll lose power, that their understanding of how the world works might get crushed. That has happened many times to people, high-profile economists, who fear having their worldview crushed by this new asset class, this new reality, this new state of consciousness, Bitcoin. And they act out. They become vengeful. They become hate-filled. They become nasty. And then they disappear because their view can't survive.
And my last question would be, what is your hottest take on Bitcoin?
Well, my hottest take on Bitcoin is that it's sent by God to unfuck our money, right? So God sent his son, we killed him, and he's like, I'll give you one more chance. I'll send Bitcoin. If this doesn't unfuck you, then there's no hope for you, and you're all gone. It is flash, done, never to be heard from again. This is our last chance.
The concern that a few individuals or companies holding large amounts of Bitcoin threatens its decentralization has been increasingly challenged, and rightly so. True decentralization doesn't depend on who owns how much, but on the fact that no single entity can control or rewrite Bitcoin's core protocol. Even if major holders teamed up, the network is built to resist centralized influence. Similarly, fears around mining centralization often miss the point. Bitcoin's incentive structure, rooted in game theory, encourages miners to act in the network's best interest. Any attack would only devalue their own asset. Stepping back, the global financial system has shifted significantly since the Reagan-Thatcher era. Profitability has increasingly favored financial speculation over real production, driven in part by decades of cheap money. A prime example: Japan's ultra-low interest rates enabled the yen carry trade, where investors borrowed in yen and invested elsewhere for higher returns. But that era may be ending. Japanese interest rates are climbing, and bond yields are surging, tightening the once abundant flow of capital and forcing a rethink of traditional investment strategies. When asked whether it's too late to buy Bitcoin, Max Keiser gave a bold response: "It's too early." He argues that fear, not price, is still the biggest barrier. For him, Bitcoin represents humanity's last, best chance to fix a broken financial system. As more countries and institutions get involved, the question isn't just whether Bitcoin will go up, it's how it will reshape the global economy. What do you think? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Before we continue with the rest of the video, do check out daily 5-minute crypto newsletter with all the latest crypto and Bitcoin news. It's a fantastic analysis of on-chain crypto data and breakdowns, and the best part is it's absolutely free. They'll cover expert predictions, breakdowns of on-chain crypto data, and any breaking news you need to know, all in a nutshell. Click the first link in the description and enter your email to join over 50,000 others in becoming a better crypto investor right now. For more Daily Dose Crypto news, check out these 2 awesome videos on your screen. Click now and we will see you on the next video.